Welcome to Indoor Voices, everybody. I'm joining me for another session today is concert violist, wonderful artist, former MIC alumni member, Matt Lipman. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Fiona.
It's a pleasure. And I understand you're in New York right now, and how are things there?
I am in New York. In March and April, I was not in New York, so I thankfully I sort of missed the worst wave, or so far the worst wave in New York, and things are kind of slowly opening. People are taking the mask wearing very seriously here, which makes me proud and happy. So things are okay. Of course, there are no concerts happening right now, which is another thing I'm sure we'll get into. But overall, New York is good. How's Chicago?
Wonderful to hear. I think I'm proud as well. You know, Chicago is certainly, you could feel like 4 months feels like a year. But when I look out, especially when numbers tend to be spiking in other areas, and I just see everyone being very careful. You know, I'm up on the North Shore, but I've been very impressed with my neighbors, impressed with our government here, and just hoping that we can continue to, keep our heads and stay the course, and then get through this till we have a vaccine and everything. So. Um, you just moved, though. You let me know. So, uh,
I did. Yeah, that was also interesting. I sort of had to wait until New York entered phase two, so I could have movers. I toyed with the idea of doing it myself because I really, and basically I had a roommate and I was kind of moving only like college leftover stuff. So I finally have like a grown up apartment and I don't have a lot of stuff, but I thought, don't hurt your arm.
no,
It's just get a mover.
no. One thing I do after all, even the post-college moves, is always get a mover, or at least, get some pizza and beverages and bring 20 of your friends over and do it in an hour. That's it. But no.
Right. Yeah, so it's good, and I love the new place. It's right on Riverside Park. I don't know
Beautiful.
how familiar you are with New York, but right now it's raining like I talked about before. But it's yeah. You can actually look out the window and see trees. It's so rare here.
I'm only laughing because I got lucky enough to find an apartment that I basically live in a tree house, but in this sort of heat we're having right now with the windows and everything, and I'm on the third floor, and it just comes in on every angle.
You're
But
baking. You're an easy bake oven.
that's right. I'm surprised you know what that is.
Oh, of course. That's all I ever wanted when I was a kid.
Well, looking at your career and where you are right now on the road, describe what brought you to this wonderful professional career, this to New York, and where it began, and maybe why the viola? How did you gravitate to the viola?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Chicago, in the southern suburbs, and I started music. Well, I should say that I was the shofar player in synagogue as a kid, and I
That's
therefore yeah, but somehow I knew how to do it. Like I figured out how to do it, and it was like I thought it was the coolest thing. I would always want to do that, and so I actually I gravitated towards the trumpet as a kid. And but I was too small or something, and so flash forward to public school, and string instruments are offered the year before trumpet was, so I just took up viola kind of with the intention of switching. Obviously, that never happened. Yeah, I really instantly fell in love with it, and I think I had a little bit of an identity crisis in high school. I sort of wanted to be the lead, to play the lead sometimes, and I was like thinking about switching to violin or whatever, and yeah, many people convinced me not to, and I think that was the right choice because one of the things that I love so much about being a violist is its versatility. Um, we can, and it's actually my goal to kind of sometimes bring it to the light, which also gives your work kind of a sense of purpose too. So, sometimes I am a soloist, if you will, but oftentimes I'm a supporting role, and I love that. And Sometimes I'm even the bass line in an ensemble, and that's like super fun.
Well, that all makes sense given, what a wonderful chamber musician you are. And every time I've watched you interacting with your colleagues and playing, the eye contact you make, the way you move around the stage, the way you listen, it's very clear that all of those things in the background play part of that. You've got a particularly special instrument too, don't you?
Yeah, that's true. That's another Chicago connection. I met Rachel Barton Pine as a high schooler while I was studying at Music Institute, and we began playing together. Actually, first I think I applied for, I forgot what they're called, these like education grants through her foundation, which does amazing work. I mean, she really, for years, has been doing amazing work. I think often overlooked and underrated. I mean, she really is an amazing person, but she also has this,
Oh, she's
yeah,
not underlooked at all. She's amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's amazing. But she has this amazing old Italian viola that I've been playing since I was 18, so 10 years now. Um,
It's a family member.
right. It's like a partner. It's like a husband or a wife
Mhm.
at this point. There are things that you don't like, but you learn to love.
You make
So
compromises. You
yeah. Uh,
therapy.
no, I'm very lucky, and yeah, at this point, I honestly I can't even imagine what I would sound like on any other viola. It's just like
Well, as a pianist, I'm always kind of envy watching musicians, stringed instruments in particular, because you have the ability to just kind of cradle that and have that sound so close. And for pianists, you go from wherever you're practicing to a concert hall, and God willing, they've got an amazing instrument and it's in great condition, but it never quite feels the same as owning that.
totally. And I mean, it's obviously not nothing can replace your actual human voice, but I think first of all the sound quality of the viola in particular, and also the fact, like you said, you do actually it actually kind of rests along your vocal cords. It really kind of brings out the vocal quality. Um,
Along those lines, talking about this, one thing I noticed when this pandemic first hit and all the musicians, everyone was going online, I saw so much Bach music, like being, looked into like comfort food, like something that we needed. And you're so lovely and kind. I'm just going to tell everyone that you've been working on a partita that you want to include in Indoor Voices, and we're going to present that as a special segment coming up. But describe a little bit about what it's like to play Bach, especially some of the unaccompanied, very difficult works that can be like an Everest to play.
yes, well, to me, it's no surprise that many string players, pianists, I'm sure as well, are turning to unaccompanied Bach. As a single voiced instrument, more or less, all string instruments are single voiced instruments. By which I mean we basically play one note at a time. Um, the wealth of repertoire that Bach wrote for violin and for cello, and violists play both sets, is super invaluable in this time when we're basically making music for no one, right? It's by ourselves. It's just for ourselves. So it's the most enriching composer you could imagine. I mean, Beethoven, Mozart, Schubert. There's no solo repertoire. For piano there is, but not for us. So it makes sense that we're turning to that. And the second partita is sort of the one that I've been playing, and of course it's framed by the monolithic chaconne, which doesn't need an introduction. But moreover, I just feel like that piece, it really just echoes kind of what we're feeling at this point in the world. It's not like it's completely tragic. It's pained. It's oftentimes lonely, but there are so many places throughout the whole partita, all 5 movements, that become optimistic. He turns a corner and all of a sudden it's a major key, and you're like, whoa, that really affected me.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't think
yeah.
I've never heard a dead end in anything Bach. There's always something to turn, as you said, to turn to come out of this. So I really look forward to hearing that and to sharing that, to be able to share that. Is that something you're going to record? You have an opportunity?
Yes, absolutely. And I've also been experimenting with Baroque tuning, 415, A415. I'm sure probably 99% of the people listening to this know what that is, but essentially 300 years ago, the tuning system was slightly different. And so that's why now you have basically a modern school and a historical practice school. And I personally, I don't see why they can't be one thing. And so I've been really because I don't have anybody to play with at 440 right now. So I've been really experimenting.
I don't think there are any halls with anything at 440 right now. So.
Right. The piano right.
Yeah. Maybe that was a good time to do that. Just go on a tour. But one of the, so you mentioned that to include in this episode today, there's a gorgeous recording of the Telemann Concerto for viola, G major, right? Isn't that?
Yeah.
And you sent me a link and recording to this yesterday, and I think I must have listened to it already. I'm a super fan, probably 50 times. Like it's like a trigger across my brain. And tell us a little bit about what that process was like to play that piece, in Alice Tilly Hall, where you were.
Absolutely. So first of all, for violists, this is one of the seminal works that we first learn. It's definitely, I would say more often than not, the first viola concerto that violists learn. It's also the first viola concerto ever composed, as far as I know. So it's a really important work for us. And that year, this was like 2 years ago and change, I played it several times. But before that, I hadn't played it since I was 12 years old or whatever. And so I fondly remember kind of revisiting it as an adult. And that was, we're so lucky to have it. I actually am such a fan of Telemann's music in general. I think he's underrated. There's a set of 12 fantasies that he wrote for solo violin without bass. And that's important to include without bass because they're contrapuntal. And I've been playing those a lot over this quarantine as well. And I think essentially he's the Baroque Haydn in my mind. Everything's a joke. Everything's quirky. No 2 phrases are the same. It's like he closes one door, opens a completely new door with a new world, and they're so creative and so full of fantasy. And I think the same about the concerto. And so it's a piece very, very dear to my heart. And of course, playing it in Alice Tilly Hall at the Chamber Music Society, where I've been a member for too long now, 6 or 7 years at this point. Of course, that was a moment I'll never forget. It was, because these Alice Tilly Hall, these places that you play regularly, no matter how big it is or how kind of grand it feels to perform there, they become they become close to your heart. And so I remember also when I was a student at Juilliard, I played Walton Concerto with Juilliard Orchestra in Alice Tilly Hall. So it's a hall I know very well. And at this point, it's just I'm just so grateful to be able to share a little picture of who I am with that audience, if that makes any sense.
Well, certainly the appreciation and like just the way you bring in the whole room. We're going to play this right now, the first 2 movements of it. And everybody, dial it up to 11, get a good stereo speaker. You're going to want to hear this because it's absolutely beautiful. Let's take a listen. Thanks, Matt. That was really gorgeous. Again, I can't listen to this enough times, and I'm sure I'm not going to listen to it enough times. But I really wanted to ask you, because I think a lot of people are curious. You can read program notes, you can read a bio about an artist, but some of the things that we never get to really talk or ask about are, you know, what does it feel like to be backstage right before you walk out? All of that preparation, the colleagues you're about to play with, a packed hall, it's really a moment. What does that feel like?
It is a moment, and for the handful or two times that I've had experiences like that in my life, they all stick out as memorable. Um, I think it's important to say also that part of the process of preparing for moments like these is engaging in with your imagination in a certain way, so that even when you're practicing it 2 months before, you still have an image of what it will feel like to do it in front of 1,000 people.
It's sort of like you're already preparing for that moment in your preparation. There's a mental step process to get to that point.
For sure. For me, that helps. I mean, after all, what we do when it's not a global pandemic is kind of a public exchange, so it helps for sure. But if I remember correctly, right before that, Telemon specifically, I remember feeling so excited. I sort of alluded to the fact earlier that the piece is not one of the most difficult pieces to play. But therefore, there's a different kind of pressure. It's even more exactly how you want every note to go. And if it doesn't go that way, there's even less of an excuse, right? So I remember thinking...
The rest of us would disagree with you because you just make it look easy, and we all know it's not easy, so thank you, but no.
I appreciate the compliment. It doesn't feel easy. I do remember just thinking, you've done the work, just communicate. And for me, I tend to get really tense if I'm nervous, bring up my shoulders or kind of have a little claw situation, which is never good. So yeah, I mean, it helps to kind of, as much as you can, I don't know if there are any students listening to this, but as much as you can kind of relate adrenaline with letting go rather than squeezing more. It's something that I had to really work on, but once you kind of practice it, it really helps.
Pay attention, Music Institute students. So in quarantine, you kind of alluded to a few things like Telemon. Are there any particular projects and things that you've really been working on while you've got this time indoors and on your own?
Yeah. So Telemon was a big part of that at the beginning, and I think there's no official recording in the works, but I would love to do an official project because, like I said, I totally fell in love with them. Yeah, they're great. The Bach has been a thing. I played the Chaconne for a live stream on Facebook a month ago at A440, and so I've been living with that partita that I can't wait to share with the Music Institute audience, the whole partita, all 5 movements. I've been working on a few commissioning ideas. Everything's still in the works, but I'm really fascinated by the idea of kind of the limited means of making music that we are all experiencing right now and what that might bring a composer to do. Of course, until it's official, I can't really talk about anything, but yeah, I've been working. Of course, the last week and a half, I've been moving and setting up and painting, and I redid my bathroom tile, and it's like...
This is the time.
Yeah.
I can't imagine your new neighbors are going to be so lucky getting to hear the Bach coming through the walls. Lucky them.
Let's hope they don't complain.
I doubt it, no. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. We miss you, of course, in Chicago and at the Music Institute. Do not be a stranger. Keep in touch with us and let us know your plans. And we hope to see you sometime next year, maybe in the spring for an alumni event or something. We'll talk to you about that. But
Absolutely.
it's been lovely. And I'm going to let your gorgeous playing take us out one more time, the movements 3 and 4 from the Telemann Concerto in G. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Fiona. It's a pleasure.
you.